Do you even know where you are? Old man. Corporal Ryan Hales stood with his arms folded, uniform crisp, impatience like a blade. The voice cut the low hum of the control tower and left a thin, bright shame in its wake. Corporal, lower your tone, but he still needs to show ID. Sergeant Matthew Cole kept the clipboard between his hands like a rulebook. He spoke procedure, not anger, and expected that to settle things. The tower ran on orders, and orders were simple things. Arthur Blake was 85. He stood at the glass and watched the ramp. His posture had the economy of someone who had carried work for a lifetime. The jacket he wore was ordinary, the shoes plain, and the name on the license would read like a small protest. Arthur reached into his back pocket with careful fingers and produced a worn leather wallet. The movement was precise, habitual, the kind learned by repetition. Around him the room tightened with attention, as if sound had narrowed to the small circle of his hands. Here, sir. Corporal Hales moved forward and took the license with the brisk, territorial curiosity of youth. He read the name, then the faded photograph, then the address, as if each line were a verdict. A thin laugh flicked from a console and died on the edge of the glass. The license was old, the paper softened by use. The photograph showed a younger man with a steady jaw, not the slight stoop by the window. On Arthur's lapel sat a tiny pin, dull with age, so small it might have been missed by anyone else. Emma Rowe did not miss it. Flight Lieutenant Emma Rowe watched from the supervisory console, fingers resting over the keys. She had seen faces that carried too many years, and faces that carried secrets. Recognition came slowly, a tightening in her throat, and she made a note without speaking. I was invited, Arthur said, voice dry and level. A reunion, he added, as if naming it might smooth that hard edge. The word landed oddly in the room, a soft thing that did not match the sharp uniforms. Sergeant Cole thumbed the radio and made the call official. Tower to command post. I need a security patrol to my location. We have an unauthorized civilian, non-compliant. The tone of the room switched to protocol, crisp and inevitable. Arthur kept his gaze on the runway as a typhoon rolled and lifted, a precise machine climbing, as if following a line he remembered. His thumb brushed the pin, and for a fraction his face altered, like a photograph gaining a shadow. No one at the consoles heard the small, internal sound of memory, the static in a headset that once meant life or loss. Corporal Hales shifted, looking to the elevator as footsteps began to answer the radio. He tried to reclaim the moment with procedure, the certainty of a checklist. Emma Rowe did not move to interrupt. She reached instead for a phone, careful and deliberate, and the tower found itself suddenly balanced on a hinge. Flight Lieutenant Emma Rowe lifted the handset with hands that did not tremble. She spoke low, precise, the words chosen like a key. This is Emma Rowe in tower. I need the wing command, she said, and the tone of the line changed. In the command office, Group Captain Marcus Thorne was finishing a report when the call arrived. The name Operation Duskfall hit the room like a dropped file. Thorne sat very still, and the paper in his hand looked suddenly unimportant. Thorne ordered a hold on any use of force. He did not yet say why, only that the man in the tower must not be touched. An aide moved with the quick, clean efficiency of habit, fingers already reaching for the red line to higher headquarters. The base hummed under an instruction that tasted of old secrets. Back in the tower, Corporal Ryan Hales heard the pause and tried to smile into something that felt like confidence. He stalled for time with procedure, reading from the license as if each syllable could settle doubt. Sergeant Matthew Cole watched him, expecting compliance, unaware that a new current had begun. Emma Rowe kept watching the pin on Arthur Blake's lapel. Her eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but recognition. She had seen emblems like that in archives, in faded photographs of men who were no longer spoken of, and the memory pushed against her chest like a held breath. The security patrol arrived in measured steps, brass on boots, eyes running the room for threats. They were younger than the man by the window, impatient for the job to be small and clear. One of them reached for Arthur's sleeve, and his fingers hesitated, because the man did not look lost or desperate, only waited with something that refused to be forced away. In the command suite, Thorne used the red phone. The words Operation Duskfall were repeated, and the response came back in clipped, classified tones. A senior officer asked to be briefed in person, and a convoy that normally handled logistics was rerouted to the tower. The word recalled old orders and older debts. Corporal Hales felt the shift like a cool hand on his shoulder. He had been ready to be certain, to draw lines in a room that liked them neat. Now the lines blurred, and for the first time the uniform seemed thinner than the stories it inherited. Arthur spoke again, quietly, as if answering a voice only he could hear. "I was with them," he said, and the sentence landed strange and small among the radios and screens. It revealed nothing and revealed everything. Emma Rowe picked up a sheet from the console and made a notation for the log. She would later find herself explaining the choice to bypass normal channels, and she would not use the word hero in that explanation. For now she watched the man and felt the room contract around a history that refused to stay hidden. The patrol commander opened his mouth to give an instruction and then closed it, waiting for something he could not name. Outside, the lift doors began to cycle, the mechanism sounding ordinary but carrying the weight of decisions. The tower held its breath while those doors moved, and a different kind of arrival was on its way. The lift doors began to close, and the tower held its breath. Steps came in measured beats, the sound of authority arriving where small confidence had been recent. The room tightened like a fist. Air Chief Marshal Andrew Wallace walked in with the calm of someone who never left things to chance. He moved past Group Captain Marcus Thorne and the wing staff as if they were scenery. His eyes went straight to Arthur Blake. Wallace stopped a pace away and lifted his hand in a salute that was precise as a verdict. The motion lingered. Absolute. And the tower rearranged itself around that single line. Laughter and smirk evaporated into a careful silence. Arthur inclined his head in return, short and exact. The reply carried a weight that no speech could increase. For a heartbeat, the tower felt like a chapel of memory. "You are standing in the presence of a man whose name was once removed from our books," Wallace said, low and steady. He named Operation Duskfall, and the sound of the name landed like a hammer on rusted metal. The consoles took it in and made room for it. Wallace spoke of a reconnaissance plane gone blind at great heights, instruments dead, and sky like a black sea. He told of a controller in a bunker who navigated by star and by memory, who held a crew's breath in his hands until the runway appeared. The story was plain, without flourish, and it made the room small. Corporal Ryan Hales felt his certainty peel away. His shoulders hunched as if the uniform had grown thin. Sergeant Matthew Cole found his clipboard inadequate for the shame pressing in. Emma Rowe listened with a tension in her throat that she had not allowed herself earlier. The pin on Arthur's lapel became a fact rather than a curiosity. Recognition settled on her face like gravity. Wallace turned his gaze to the two younger men, and the tone shifted from history to judgment. "You treated him with contempt," he said, and the words landed like a formal reprimand. The sentence did not shout, it simply redefined them. Arthur placed his hand on the windowsill, small and steady, as if anchoring himself to the present. "They are young," he said, voice quiet, "and they have been schooled in machines, not in memory." He asked for mercy and for a chance to teach. Wallace considered the request and then set a course that stitched repair into authority. "Make no rash decisions," he ordered to Marcus Thorne. "Bring the men to me at morning briefing," he added, "and establish heritage duty as a formal program." Officers moved with catalog precision, orders slipping from mouth to list to action. The tower resumed its work. But the air had changed. Arthur kept his hand by the lapel of his jacket and felt the small coin there, a proof against erasure. The lift doors closed behind the last senior officer, and the silence that followed held a different charge. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of something acknowledged and not yet resolved. The silence after the senior officers left did not last. Steps returned, softer now, and the tower reorganized into work. People took up consoles with careful movements. Corporal Ryan Hales sat with his shoulders tight. He avoided Arthur Blake's face as if looking would reopen an old wound. Sergeant Matthew Cole tapped a pen on his clipboard, small gestures of guilt on display. Their earlier confidence had thinned. Wallace's words hung over the room. "You treated him with contempt," had landed like a verdict. The young men felt it as a weight procedure could not lift. Training had no answer for shame. Arthur kept his thumb on the dull pin and watched the jets, eyes steady. When he spoke, his voice was dry and honest. "They are young," he said, "and they do not know what they guard." He asked for learning, not punishment. Emma Rowe moved closer and took responsibility for her call. Marcus Thorne approached and offered action rather than speech. He mapped next steps with clipped efficiency and a clear face. Hales fumbled an apology. "Sir," he said, "I am sorry." Arthur met his gaze and nodded once. Not dismissal, but an invitation to change. The nod shifted something in Hales, small and real. Wallace intervened with the authority of repair. "No dismissal," he said. "Bring them to me at first light. Establish heritage duty," he ordered. "And the base will teach the lessons of those who served before. Do not make examples of men," he added. "Teach honor." Orders moved through the room. Staff officers wrote tasks. Messengers carried instructions. And the base began to translate rebuke into reform. Cole felt relief braided with shame. Emma penciled notes for the new program and thought of rituals that might give context to a uniform. Arthur spoke again, voice steady. "Teach them the why," he said, "and show them the men behind the machines." He proposed oral histories and debriefs, ways for memory to be passed, not filed. He wanted continuity, not ceremony. Wallace agreed, and the officers set the plan in motion. The tower resumed its rhythm, but the posture of the young had altered from arrogance to attention. Work continued, but mornings would now include memory. A plaque would be proposed. Lesson plans drafted. Names restored where they had been erased. These were material fixes, visible and finite, while the deeper work would take patience. Hales found his hands trembling as he folded his cap, the movement awkward and earnest. He had joined to belong, not to bruise, and the realization pressed him quiet. Emma drafted a short syllabus on a scrap of paper, listing veterans to invite and brief modules to run. She imagined a sharp, practical module before rookie flights, a small ritual to steady a hand. Respect would be practiced, not assumed. Change would be slow, but lasting. The tower continued with its tasks, but future mornings would come with a new lesson. Ryan Hales pushed open the diner door with a careful step. The movement small after weeks of thinking. He scanned the room and found Arthur Blake already at a table, hands wrapped around a mug. Arthur nodded once, and the nod was invitation enough. Ryan sat and folded his hands, awkward in his civvies. "Sir," he said, "I do not know what to say." The apology came plain and immediate, a list of things he had done and could not undo. Arthur watched him with an economy of expression, learned by long years. "Sit," he said, and the word had the weight of permission. The two men settled into a silence that felt deliberate rather than empty. Ryan began in fragments, not rehearsed, not cunning. "I laughed," he said. "I mocked you in front of everyone." He spoke each fault as if setting it down so it would be gone. Arthur listened without hurry, fingers finding the edge of the table like a rudder. When Ryan paused, Arthur asked one small question. "Why did you join?" he said. The question was simple, but it opened a space. To serve. Ryan answered, and then, to be part of something. He looked surprised at his own words. He expected reproach, not a quiet question that asked for a reason, rather than guilt. Arthur inclined his head and tapped the table with a practiced thumb. The job is good, he said, and then added, but remember the man beside you. He spoke of companions and small obligations, the tiny courtesies that keep a watch from fraying. They talked of details that stitched past to present, early briefings, the taste of camp tea, the static in a headset that means trouble. Ryan listened and learned the language of memory, each anecdote turning impression into duty. Meanwhile, at the base, Flight Lieutenant Emma Rowe stood before a group of recruits and introduced a veteran as someone they would meet and learn from. Today we listen to those who came before, she said, and her voice made the instruction practical and immediate. A small plaque had been placed by the tower entrance with names and a short account. Recruits filed past it with caps in hand and read aloud in muted tones. The act was tangible and tiny, a ritual that made history accessible. Back in the diner, Ryan reached across the table and placed his palm over Arthur's hand. "Sir," he said, "I will do better." The promise was a movement, not a sound, and Arthur closed his fingers in answer for a moment. "You will teach," Arthur said, and the sentence was not an order, but a trust. He let the young man stand with that new responsibility, a torch put into uncertain hands with faith in repair. Ryan left steadier than he had arrived, shoulders set to carry a lesson. At the base, recruits practiced a short routine before flight, a moment to remember names. The work of memory began to live in small acts. Arthur walked back toward his lodgings with measured steps. The past finally named, aloud. The plaque would remain. Recruits would pass it, and lessons would be taught. The change was not spectacle, but it had started, and that was everything. Arthur Blake waited to be seen. Ryan Hales waited to understand. The distance between contempt and honor was a single phone call and the courage to listen. In your corner of the world, someone carries knowledge you haven't valued yet. This week, identify one person whose experience you've overlooked. Sit with them for 20 minutes. Ask about their work, their service, their craft. Don't record it. Don't rush it, just listen. Because heritage isn't what we preserve in amber. It's what we carry forward in practice. And that begins with the simple, revolutionary act of paying attention.